welcome. Welcome to this book club session. My name is José Parra, and dear audience, we're here to speak about the book called The AI Dilemma that Juliet Powell and Art Kleiner have written. Let's just start, and as I said, if you just joined, please feel free to use the chat to interact with us, to ask any question you may have, and to share your thoughts. To the extent that it is possible, I'll be picking up from the chat and make you part of this conversation. Art, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Jose, and thank you so much for doing this. Thank you to IMD, and thank you to everybody who's dialed in. It's terrific to be this morning.
Fantastic. So the book's title, The AI Dilemma. What's the dilemma about? What is the AI dilemma?
Well, first of all, when we wrote the book and when we were putting it together, OpenAI had not yet released publicly ChatGPT, but everybody knew that, major things were coming. The pace of innovation was accelerating, and we were hearing wonderful things that were accurate about what it would do for humanity. And in fact, even at that time, the values and uses of AI were indispensable behind the scenes, everything from autocorrect to transcribing to translating language to medical diagnosis, vaccines. Just a whole wave of innovation was clearly on a wave that would continue based on uses of AI's various types of models. And at the same time, there was embedded bias. There were people whose lives were profiled and then damaged, in lots and lots of cases, and cases that a lot of people knew about, the Dutch child benefits case, and many in the United States. And then there were cases people didn't know about, but that were gradually coming to light, and cases in which people's data was misused. And so it became obvious that, on the one hand, the technology was enormously beneficial. On the other hand, it was dangerous and could be even more dangerous. Leave aside, whether AI has consciousness, just in the forms that existed at the time. There were real risks to human welfare and other risks. And on one hand, it's promising. On the other hand, it's dangerous. They're the same hands. That's the dilemma. How do we manage something that has so much power and potential in so many different directions?
All right. Indeed, attention. Let us put this in context. So when you published the book, when you started with the book, OpenAI had not yet released ChatGPT. And in a sense, that release was a fantastic favor to you, because the topic where you're an expert, the topic that you have been reflecting and writing about, suddenly became the extremely relevant topic for executives and basically everyone with access to a smartphone around the world. And this importance, this relevance, makes the dilemma that you are mentioning extremely important also for everyone, because on the one side we have the fantastic use cases. We see companies starting to apply AI. We see, as you said, medical applications of AI that can help with diagnostics, with treatment, even save lives. So we have the good phase, the nice phase of AI. But on the other side, we have all the biases, the disinformation, all the problems that we don't even know how are going to unfold. And this generates this tension between, should I like AI? Should I dislike AI? And in a sense, both sides are so intertwined that it's very difficult to isolate and have just one judgment. Now, building on that, in the book, you referred to the trolley problem. And this is a piece that I found extremely interesting, and I'm sure that the participants in this interview, right, would love to learn more about it. Can you walk us through the trolley problem and give us some insights about the research you have done, and then link that with the AI?
Certainly. And before I do, let me just make one quick correction. We were writing the book when OpenAI announced ChatGPT and released it.
Yeah.
So it was actually, our book was in copy edit, and we took the manuscript back and rewrote it rapidly. And, that's one reason why most of the AI books are a little bit vague, because events are moving so quickly that it's hard
Mhm.
to keep ahead of the curve in terms of what the implications are.
Mhm.
So one of the early groups was at the MIT Media Lab, which was the group that worked on a program called the Moral Machine. And it took a real dilemma, which is well known, the trolley problem. A trolley, or in this case, a self-driving car, is moving down the road. And on one hand, it could, and it's moving too fast and the brakes give out, or it's moving fast and the brakes give out. And there isn't time to stop. It has a choice. The car could either swerve to the right and hit one group of people, or swerve to the left and hit another group of people. And the moral machine and the trolley problem asks the same question. Which group of people is more expendable than the other? Older people or younger people? Men or women? Sedentary people or athletic people? Families or professionals? And the moral machine set this up as a kind of online exercise where people could take these choices, and they were hoping to find out exactly what humanity believed. And there's two important things to learn from this, or to observe in this. The first is that we would never worry about a human driver in the same way, right? If a human driver is driving down the street, the human driver doesn't have to think in advance about whether older people or younger people are more expendable. We trust, or most of us trust, that the human driver will have reflexes to figure out something on the fly. And if the reflexes, don't work in time and someone is struck, and we're ready to forgive the human driver. But AI requires thinking in advance about what the right thing to do is. And that forces us into a different frame of mind about human decision making altogether. It's
Mhm.
not enough to trust intuition and instinct. We now have systems that have to plan in advance for how they're going to attack moral and deal with moral dilemmas. That's new.
Mhm.
It's growing, but it's new.
Mhm. Absolutely. It implies that when we design AI-based systems, we also need to program its moral compass. And this is indeed a challenge, because one of the things that one finds out when reading the book is that there are very few uh, groups of people that are consistently saved by the humans using or playing this game, playing this exercise. So if our values don't align, how can we expect the values of an AI to somehow be in line with the values of a human? Is this a problem that we can even solve, to program I'm going to call it the moral compass of an AI in a way that is consistently accepted by humans? Or is this a problem that is unsolved and will remain unsolved?
Let's reframe the problem a little bit. What the moral machine discovered is that when people take this exercise, the values of who to save, older people, younger people, men or women, families, professionals, whatever, the values vary by culture.
Hmm.
So groups of people from, France and Italy said something different than groups of people from China and Japan. And there was very little common agreement. It was generally agreed, people agreed, if you have a group of 6 people and a group of 2 people, attack the 2 people. If you have pregnant women, favor pregnant women over other individuals. And if you have humans versus pets or animals, the animals are more expendable. Other than that, we all disagree. So
Mhm.
the problem then, you say, is, can we make any moral decisions at all? And I would reframe that to say, in the absence of an overarching series of guidelines and rules that have consensus for everyone, how do we behave? And how do we set up our systems with the flexibility to adjust and learn not just from data, but also from precedent? How do we create the kind of flexible morality that human beings need to operate with? And we could debate what flexible morality means, but but how do we create the kind of decision-making capability that we have? And does that mean that in every case where there's an AI involved in a significant decision, we need a human being involved? Or does it even mean we need some kind of training for the AI and for the human being that have to fit together and go together?
Mhm. Very interesting open questions that are probably difficult to answer, and this is why we are presenting
Right.
them here and what makes the book so interesting. It makes me think about the question of responsibility. If we have judges making decisions about who should go to jail, or we have doctors deciding who should receive a treatment based on the diagnostics of the disease, we of course impute responsibility to the doctor, and the majority of people, at least the ones with whom I talk, they would prefer a human being somehow involved. But there are cases in which we humans make more errors than the machines. So theoretically, at least theoretically, we should prefer the AI to make the decision about the sentence or about the diagnostics, right? But it's somehow very difficult to accept that we're going to put our future in the virtual hands of a machine and let that machine decide without any kind of supervision, especially if we know that the machine sometimes will do an error, right?
Well, the data is a little bit ambiguous. When asked point blank, would you rather have the decision made by a robot, an AI, or a person? Most people will say, I'd rather have the person making the decision. Not everybody. There are people who would favor, I'd rather, the machine is more impartial. When you ask about specific decisions and which one would turn out better, many people sometimes would favor decisions that actually were generated by an AI. And the the research on this kind of thing is just beginning, so it's hard to know for sure. But I think a lot of it comes down, Jose, to what we think about human judgment and the judgment of systems.
Mhm.
You know, it's
Yeah,
a little bit like being, I have three kids,
yeah,
and they're all girls, when they're all in their 20s now, but when the first one was born, I thought, I've got this. I know just what I'm doing. She's sleeping, she's so quiet. I know everything I need to know about being a dad. It's going to be a piece of cake.
sure.
Then she got older and her sisters came along, and I realized I didn't know anything. I was going to be on a roller coaster ride for at least the next 18 years and probably much longer,
Mm.
of coming to terms with how little I knew and how much I had to learn on the fly. And that's where humanity is right now with artificial intelligence. It was so quiet for so long, and then it started moving very fast. And now it's
Mm.
growing faster than we are. And we don't know what kind of trouble it's going to get into. And all we know is that on the fly, we have to develop the habits and practices that will make us into good parents. Now,
Mm.
there are a lot of parents who we might say, you're not good parents. There are a lot of kids who have good parents, but grow up, to get into trouble.
Sure.
So we have to give the same kind of forgiveness to human behavior and organizational behavior, while also at the same time holding us and our organizations to a higher standard than we ever have held them to before.
Mhm.
That's the dilemma.
The whole reflection is extremely interesting for a variety of reasons, but I'm going to pick up just one. If we use this analogy, we are implicitly or actually explicitly assuming that the AI that we humans have created is going to develop some kind of consciousness or is going to grow to something that is going to have a life beyond us. It reminds me a little bit to tension that I observe or a little friction that I sense myself when I refer to this technology as artificial intelligence. Because just by using that name, intelligence, we're anthropomorphizing the technology. We are giving it some human attributes, which may or may not be correct. There's, of course, an explanation why we do it, because we want it to behave like a human, because we create it to think in a way like a human. We speak about neural networks, right? Which is what make our thinking happening. But it also makes us forget that these are systems often based in probabilities to recognize patterns. And we lose a little bit of context when we call this artificial intelligence, or when we think about this creature about like as if it was a sort of child, right?
Yeah. Intelligence is often in the mind of the beholder. So let's say there are four possible futures for, and let's just call it artificial intelligence because everybody does. And let's beg the question of whether it's actual conscious intelligence. But there's four possible futures. One is AI develops a mind of its own, a consciousness of its own, and is self-willed, and therefore could become malevolent. Second is AI develops a consciousness of its own, but is bounded by its original purpose and loyalty to humans, kind of obeys Asimov's laws, and
Yes.
basically is benevolent in everything it does, or at least tries to be. The third is that AI does not develop what we would call independent conscious awareness, never does. It just doesn't happen to be technically possible for various reasons. But it gives the impression that it does, and people respond to it as if it does. So it kind of might as well be intelligent. And the fourth is that we all come to know AI the way we all come to know word processors now. We know what they're good for and what they're not good for and how to manage them, and the various chain of thought type prompts that get good responses from them. But we come to regard them as a powerful tool that is nonetheless a tool that requires a handler, a wielder, a tool. And if we're going to like full consciousness, then all bets are off. It's this conversation is gets replaced by a different conversation.
Indeed.
And with the other three, we're in the same conversation, which again is how do humans develop the capabilities to manage this type of technology, this type of powerful tool. It's the same conversation that humanity had about nuclear weapons. It's the same conversation in a way that we had about the internet, although we didn't know just how dramatic the effects would be, or that we're having about social media now. I used to work for the Whole Earth Catalog, and Stuart Brand wrote, "We are as gods, we might as well get good at it." That was the catchline of the original Whole Earth Catalog. And we might as well is the important part of that phrase. We don't really have a choice but to gain proficiency as people. All of us together as humanity, but all of us as individuals also. That's what the jobs debate is all about.
Yeah, I'm going to highlight that point because I think that this is of high relevance and interest for our audience. AI is here, that's a fact. We don't know how it is going to evolve, but there is an imperative for us, which is to learn about it, to educate ourselves, and to prepare for whatever future may come. Because four of the scenarios that you have described here are going to be relevant scenarios that will require a different way of working, thinking, acting, or engaging in relationships with the digital realm from us. So there's definitely an imperative of training, of educating ourselves. I have some comments here in the chat that I would like to summarize. It's one question first by Guillaume, a theoretical question, little disclaimer. If you could demonstrate that AI drivers kill 100 times less than human drivers, does that relativize in any way this dilemma? Because even if the decision was wrong every time in the trolley problem, still 100 times less people would be dying in traffic accidents. And then we have a point by Christoph adding to that comment, saying, in case we cannot determine what is right, would be randomization an option? This is what is getting our audience busy right now. I think the example of the trolley is so powerful that it's difficult to forget, right?
So somebody is clever enough to throw data at our theory. Uh, yeah, so of course, the fact that on average, self-driving cars produce fewer accidents and fewer fatalities, if that's true. Here the data is not fully conclusive as far as I know. But if that's true, then yes, that means we tolerate and welcome self-driving cars. That doesn't take away the responsibility for deciding in advance what, values we think the designers of those cars should program into them. And what, and if we just sort of say, let it learn from the data, well, we've had enough experience now with misinformation and with inherent bias, and with, you ask for Vikings and you get people of color, you ask for Mexicans and you get people wearing sombreros. We have too many examples of the data producing an amplification of all of the incorrect conclusions and interpretations that we can be as human beings. We need something more than just, following it. At the same time, yes, we're moving to a world where we have self-driving vehicles. And by the way, an unrecognized part of that is that if you have self-driving vehicles in a city, you're going to have changed human behavior. Just like if you have a smartphone in your pocket, you're going to have changed human behavior. So for instance, I think people will start wearing clothing that is designed to identify themselves as pedestrians to driving cars, just because, and many, many other things like that.
That is a very, very interesting point. Like the fact that we have technology will change our behavior, which is somehow linked to the question that Marco is asking in the chat, which is the same but different. Like, can we humans change the course that AI is going to take? Like, to which extent can we influence in which of these four scenarios we may land? What do you think about it, Art?
There is always the opportunity to influence the way the world is going to work. And some people have more influence than others. And some people may feel like they have no influence when they actually have a little bit, and they could amplify what they have. And this is a complicated field of endeavor. So for instance, if you've worked for a large company, you know that on some level, you have no influence over what the company is going to do. It's going to return investment to shareholders and it's going to operate according to what the people at the top want it to do. But on another level, you know that everything you do either advances the company forward or doesn't, and is noticed by your peers and changes the environment of at least the area in which you work. You have no influence and some influence at the same time. And that's how the political, the socio-technical system works that produces AI. The AI systems codify and amplify the structures that are already in place. We have some influence over those structures, and one of the challenges is now how to learn to marshal our influence, even as the other billions of people on the planet are doing the same.
Thank you very much for that. It's also somehow linked to what I'm reading in the chat, which has to do with influence, to the extent with which we can influence the future. I read in the chat about a few AI companies imposing some products and so forth and so on. Data plays a fundamental role in the form and future development of anything that has to do with AI. And there are a few companies owning or having access to a lot of data. In many jurisdictions, this data belongs to the people to whom it refers, right? So I'm here in Switzerland, my, let's say, Google data belongs to me. So I can ask Google to delete my data, and before that, I can just download it. To which extent can I, as an individual, in your opinion, based on your research, use my data to influence that agenda, or use that data to help companies other than the ones that help me to create that data innovate? I'm thinking along the lines of data cooperatives, which is a big topic, data unions, if we want to use a stronger word. Is this something that you see happening? And if yes, to which degree, and what could be implications of that?
We spend a lot of time on, again, a lot of the AI dilemma is grounded in our understanding of the rights that people have about data.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more complicated than it seems at first. Juliet Powell, my co-author, is a pioneer in this effort. She worked with Intel for some time on a project called We the Data that was really grounded in this question of what rights do we, should we, and can we have over our personal data? And a huge amount of personal data is collected. Europe, of course, the EU is a pioneer in figuring out how to manage and regulate this with GDPR. And GDPR has been very successful at giving people an impression that they should have control over their data and that they can have control over at least a significant extent
Mm-hmm.
to prevent the misuse of their data. And at the same time, if we had true full control over our data, that would mean something like having an exchange where every time our data was used for a purpose, we could govern what it was used for. Yes, I don't want to receive these type of ads. Yes, I want to be paid, every time my data is aggregated into something that is going to lead to this type of research. I want those decisions to be made easily. I don't want to have to read through 6, pages of fine print before I click accept and still don't know what I'm, clicking yes to.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing does not exist. And we may, humanity may never get there. On the other hand, ultimately, a world in which we did not have full or relatively full control of our data, that would be a pretty grim world to live in.
I couldn't agree more. Continuing on that, do you see moves? I mean, you interact with a lot of companies, you're doing research. Do you see moves along those lines by companies that are starting to adopt the discourse of the data belongs to our clients, we utilize it, but we want to help our clients or empower our clients to use the data in a way that suits their needs? I have seen some signals in some pharmaceutical companies because, of course, the healthcare data is very sensitive. So the mantra of, yeah, we have access to your data, we are custodians of your data, but it's yours and we want to empower you. So I'm starting to see some timid moves along those lines. Does this resonate with you?
It does to an extent. The problem, so yes, I see moves, a lot of conversation. People like Jared Lanier are talking about it regularly. Other people are talking about, how do we create the kinds of systems that give people access to their data. The problem is anything that worked would have to be an interoperable, very high volume global system. So it needs protocols, it's needs basic means of exchange. It's like Swift or the internet or TCP/IP. And I haven't seen any serious proposals to create that, or if they are serious, they need a lot more momentum before they could take hold. What we have seen is we've seen companies that are giving people control over their data in more specific ways for more specific purposes. So for example, there's a company called Catalyte based in Baltimore in the US that sets up kind of online tests for people who come from any background whatsoever, but not a computer science background. But they might have innate coding ability. And this tests for their coding ability, not just in the answers they give, but in the speed with which they take the test and their reactions and their patterns, it uses the data of their personal movements and identity in order to determine whether they have this ability. And it places people in coding jobs.
Yeah.
And they often do better in accuracy and speed than people with computer science degrees.
Oh.
And there are more and more uses of data of that sort, where people are discovering that they can qualify or certify for an opportunity in a way that wouldn't have been possible without data.
At the end of the day, data revealing hidden insights that can be valuable for people. That's another message that I would like to highlight from this conversation. Data reveals insights. Many of these insights can be initially hidden, so through its analysis, being it with more modern generative AI or more traditional, I'm going to call this time data science, we can gain value there. I would like to use the time that we have left to open a slightly different topic. In the book, you speak about creative friction. And that's something that catches my attention very, very fast. Could you give the audience a little bit of insight about what you mean with creative friction?
Okay, well, I know everyone in this audience is a computer user because otherwise you wouldn't be here. So you know what it's like to be irritated when a computer system is not seamless, when it slows down, when it gets in your way. You know what it's like to have to figure out how to make a computer system work. It's irritating. User experience designers call this friction, and they try to remove any friction whatsoever so that you can get as quickly as you want to making the purchase or sending the message or typing in the right spelling. And this is called frictionlessness. And one of the big books on user experience is titled Don't Make Me Think. And that's the goal. We want everybody to just click in as if the interface and your synapses were part of the same entity. And that turns out not to be a good way to grow as a person or to learn the skills of managing AI, because we delegate our decision making to entities. It makes us feel like we're in control. You know, I click this button, I get right where I want to get. But actually, we're delegating the control over what happens when you click the button to the system. If we are designers of systems and we try to make it frictionless, you know, get to market as fast as possible, move fast and break things, release it, don't worry about the consequences because it will come back and we'll deal with it then. That's another form of frictionlessness. Creative friction is when, as a group of people, a team working on a project launch, or a group of people figuring out what to do, or the group within yourself that is trying to figure out whether to click that button or not, you want to take the time and devote the attention necessary to figuring out what to do about that particular challenge, because your judgment needs time and training to develop. It's not like we have the judgment we need, like right from the start when we graduate from high school or college. We have to learn it over the course of our lives. And that takes work, attention. When you have a real choice, it's more difficult. That's sometimes how you know you actually have a choice to make, because, oh my gosh, this is hard. Oh, I must be making a real choice. We have the capacity to make a limited number of those choices. We want to build that capacity and make it better. That doesn't mean becoming, you know, purely logical. It means bringing all of ourselves to bear in what we do. And that is friction. Creative friction is when you have a group of people from different backgrounds thinking that way, genuinely interested in what each other has to say and why we think the way we do, and practiced in coming to a full understanding with every part of ourselves.
Wow. I would say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like if you're using the system and you're struggling with it, this struggle actually can, if you do the correct reflection afterwards, generate new insights and make you learn and think. Now that we are speaking about the dilemma, right, the good aspects, the bad aspects, there's this discussion about, is the AI going to make us less intelligent because we will, using your lingo now, delegate many of the synapses, right, that we need to make. I don't know if you have a particular view on that. Like, did the previous generations less smart, less mentally agile because before they had to, make some relatively basic but not immediate calculations, using a pen and paper and kind of thinking. And this is something that we now get in a matter of, of nothing, with a calculator. Has this made us less prepared to address the complex world, or has it helped us? Can we draw some parallels about the potential expected impact of AI on our cognitive capacity or attitude to approach challenges?
If I go to another country and I don't know the language, let's say it's the Netherlands and I don't know Dutch,
Mhm.
and people speak English quite a lot there, so I can get by without knowing Dutch. But let's say I really want to learn the language and I'm going to immerse myself by living there. Which is going to help me more? If I bring along an AI-based translator and learn from those interactions, or if I don't, if I try to do it all with human effect. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I don't know which is better, but I suspect that I'm going to do better if I have the tool and then I pay attention to the language and to what it advises me to say and what it tells me to hear. But I have to pay attention.
Mhm.
If I delegate it, then I won't. So a lot of your question is, how do we kind of excel as human beings? And there's a joy in getting it right,
Mhm.
right? It's a kind of pleasure that comes from having proficiency. In fact, a lot of what holds us back in things is that we don't know how to do it well. And training, the worst part of being trained in anything is the beginning part when when you're not good at it. So if I have AI tools that get me quicker to the part where I really feel like I have some standing, I'll like that. I'll enjoy that and I'll want to work with that. That may be the kind of world we're moving into. And it may be that as we gain proficiencies in ways we didn't expect. So one more thing. Right now, misinformation is a big problem. I'm being lied to all the time. Whenever I ask Claude or ChatGPT for information, I know I have to check it. What will it take for me to develop the awareness of when I'm being misinformed and when the information is accurate? Am I going to have to look everything up, or am I going to develop a sixth sense about what's real and what's not? I can't prove it anyway, either way. There is research that suggests that people do develop that sixth sense the more they use the technology, but it's not conclusive yet.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that's the kind of question you're asking. What does it take to evolve
Yeah.
to meet the machines we've created?
Exactly. It's again linked to what we were seeing in the chat before about how technology will change human behavior, how human behavior affects technology. We have about 7 minutes to continue this conversation. I have a comment here from Indira, which says, you touch upon the transformative potential of AI in various sectors. Considering its capabilities, what are the most significant ways AI could revolutionize educational systems, and what ethical considerations should we address to ensure it enhances rather than undermines educational equity?
So, great question, as are all these questions that you've voiced, Jose. And education is something I've worked in this field a lot. I edited a book called Schools That Learn. My parents were school teachers, thought a lot about education. And everything changes when the amount of data that a generative AI system can process goes beyond 1,000 characters. And when a generative AI system can process millions of bits, millions of characters, then everything a child does in school, every classroom, probably gets recorded and processed and becomes part of that student's profile. Now, that is really dangerous. It's also true, by the way, for everything that happens in the workplace. So a performance appraisal is now going to be based on what happened in every meeting you were in. And, bias becomes incredibly important because the machines process people with accents or dialect differently than they process people who speak like newscasters. So a child could be misidentified and tracked even more than they are today by the data. Or there could be the use of data that we say tailor the lessons to the individuals, but it could be like having a learning assistant all the time with each student everywhere, no matter how disadvantaged their background, that is congenial, that gives the child and the human teachers enough control that it transforms what education could look like in a really positive way. That's the short answer to a much longer answer, the short version.
We could just spend 1 hour speaking about that one question, but I like the answer that you have given because it also showcases again this dilemma, which is with what we open this conversation between you and me, Art, about the good things that AI can do, the dangerous aspects of using AI for solving different problems, and this is a very clear example in which we see that it can do both. And as good or as bad as it is, we don't yet have the answer. The future is still to be written. If there's one message that I would like to emphasize now that we approach the end, would be the fact that we humans influence the future of technology, of course, more or less in a more or less direct way, of course, with limited abilities sometimes. But if we continue thinking about our data, the way we use it, eventually there is a window for amplifying that influence. And at the same time, the technology changes our behavior, and one of the ways in which our behavior has to change is that we need to continue learning about artificial intelligence. We are still at the very beginning of this AI journey, despite the flashy results that we have seen so far, and it's going to be a very exciting conversation that hopefully we could repeat in a couple of months, maybe years. It would be fantastic, Art, to repeat this. I'm just improvising now. I'm inviting you again on at least my behalf to the book club again, or maybe to another type of interaction in a couple of years when events keep unfolding and we keep learning, as we have to, about artificial intelligence and its dilemmas. Thank you very much, Art. It was a pleasure having you.
No, so very much, Jose, and thank you for setting this up, and thank you to everyone.
Thank you. Have a fantastic rest of the day.
You too.
Bye-bye.